What the hell is going on in here?
In a world where hackers are working day and night to infiltrate your network, Jay and Penny are here to talk about it. Welcome to the Order of the Cipher.
Penny, I am very excited to hear about your woman in technology and science.
She is so cool.
Tell me about
So
it.
I decided to talk about Katie Bowman today. She has a PhD from MIT. And in 2019, she was part of a team of scientists that created the first ever photograph of a black hole.
I remember learning about Katie. She stitched it together from
Right.
many images.
So there were like 200 scientists that did it, but she made or was instrumental in making one of the algorithms that they used. It was called CHIRP, Continuous High Resolution Image Reconstruction Using Patch Priors. CHIRP.
Chirp.
It's
They got
it's
the
a lot
chirp
of
out of
words,
it. That's what was important.
Right, that was important. So they had 8 telescopes around the world that each telescope would take a single ray of light and record it at the exact same time down to the picosecond.
What?
I know.
Picosecond?
I know. That's smaller than a nanosecond, which is pretty dang tiny. So down to the picosecond, they would take this. And then these scientists, using their algorithms, would stitch them together. And the algorithms would fill in all the information that was missing.
Yeah.
So they had 4 teams. Katie was on one of them that took their algorithms and all the information that they had gathered, and then using different assumptions, ran the information through and came up with a photograph. And when those 4 teams came back together after a month of data crunching, there were 3 things that were similar across all of the images. All of them had a ring. The ring was the same size. And the ring was lighter in the south.
Okay.
So that gave them the basis for formulating the first ever photograph of a black hole.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Right? And since then, now Katie is a professor at Caltech. And in March of this year, she released a paper that gives information about how magnetic fields behave around black holes.
Okay. She's really pursuing the black hole thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Good for her. And,
Super cool.
Anything else about Katie?
No, she's
Well,
amazing. I mean, aside from she's amazing.
Yes, I remember at the time a tremendous celebration of her. It was really an incredible achievement. The first picture of the black hole and coming up with the algorithm to do it. And she was,
Right.
Oh, I remember actually there was a fact that, so they used a sneaker net for data transfer.
Yeah. The data was too large. So it went onto hard drives and media that they had, but it was too large to transfer over the internet. So they had to, synchronize.
Yeah, they would mail them, ship them around the world, wherever they needed to go to get the data to her and get crunched.
Because it was massive.
But I'll tell you that story because it's just so damn cool.
Right
So Murray Boyd is named for 2 women, Grace Murray Hopper and Evelyn Boyd Granville. Grace Murray Hopper was an educator, and she was in the Navy. She educated people on computer science. She created the first human readable programming language called COBOL. And one of her teaching aids was a length of wire that was the distance light traveled in a nanosecond. And the reason that she had this length of wire, it's probably a few reasons. Two main reasons were given. One is she wanted to explain to people why it took so long for satellite communications to get out and back, and she would do it relative to this piece of wire. And the other thing she wanted to explain to people is why computer systems needed to be so small, and that you couldn't have a room-sized computer anymore. You had to get computers to be smaller if you wanted them to be faster, because there's a physicality. It's not
right.
Like, on the one hand, light seems instantaneous, but it's just not. And there's, in fact, the wire that she was holding was the speed of light in a vacuum, not the speed of electrons in that wire, because when electrons try to move at the speed of light, they bounce around. They can't actually progress at that speed through the wire.
Kind of like a Roomba.
They work, electrons and Roombas, exactly the same.
Same.
Yeah. And we, like the electron cloud, that's like when the Roomba kicks up dust and it's just all,
There we go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Picoseconds. Mm-hmm. She, at one point, started carrying around a pepper shaker because a picosecond is the size of a piece of pepper.
A grain of pepper as compared to...
This of 18 inches of wire, I think.
18 inches of wire.
Yeah.
A picosecond compared to a nanosecond.
A thousandth of that wire gets
Wow.
you, a picosecond.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah. So I just loved her, teaching and aids, and she was always thinking. And
she was also one of the first commanders in the military, in the Navy.
Women.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
One of the first women.
Yeah. So actually, my woman this week is Pamela Melroy, who was the second woman to command a space shuttle.
She's so cool. I love her already.
And she's now going to be, she is the nominee, and we presume will be confirmed. She's incredibly qualified. She will be the deputy administrator of NASA. And
That's amazing.
The administrator of NASA, that can tend to be a bit of a political choice, but the deputy administrator, they're the ones getting things done. They are executing.
The administrator has to schmooze. The deputy gets the work done.
Gets it done. So Pamela is in there. She's getting the work done, and she was an astronaut. She was in the Air Force. What really stood out to me is that she was motivated by really big dreams as a kid, and that seems to have stuck with her. So when she was a kid, she described her dolls being planes in the air. And when the moon landing occurred, she turned to her parents and said, "I want to be an astronaut." And they said, "Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
You can do that.
Whatever you want."
So she knew that at the time, the astronauts that were getting into like the Apollo program and the programs of that late 60s era were test pilots, and she describes a test pilot as being like a scientist engineer that runs experiments on planes in the air. And I never considered that that's what a test, who was that?
It sounds logical and very challenging.
Yes, that's why they chose test pilots, because they had the science background. They understood the feelings of flying in addition to the physics of flying. So, theory and practicality. They could handle extreme G's. That was part of the testing. And they were in experimental aircraft that often failed and required them to react quickly. So there were these qualities that made them, cool under all kinds of pressure.
All kinds of pressure.
Those qualities made them uniquely suited to be astronauts. So she understood that that's where they were coming from. So that's what she did. She became a military test pilot and did about 5,000 hours of flight time with the Air Force, and then got chosen for the astronaut program. Got to fly the shuttle a few times. Pamela relayed a story about how working in NASA changed for everyone after the Columbia disaster. So she was an administrator by the time that event occurred, and she described a shift as a manager in that environment, and a shift in the employees as everyone just really got very emotionally connected to the thought that there could be a failure.
This is real.
Yeah, this is real. Yeah. So there was an
This
interesting...
happened to people I know.
Mm-hmm. And so things shifted there, and she told an interesting story about that. She got to the point where she was running the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA.
DARPA.
And, DARPA is responsible for a lot of what's on the internet today. Not the beginnings of it, but there are significant pieces of its evolution that DARPA had a hand in. And DARPA is also where we had the challenge for autonomous vehicles.
Right.
And many of the autonomous vehicle companies that we see today have students and researchers and employees that were involved in those original DARPA challenges. But that's not the area that she was in. She was in the more military side, and I printed out this description. So she was in the Tactical Technology Office. It says their mission is to provide or prevent strategic and tactical surprise. So basically, they create these systems that are going to sneak up on people and screw you up big time.
And they're also going to prevent us from being surprised by other people who create the same kind of thing.
Exactly. So they describe this as high payoff, high risk development of revolutionary new platforms. And one of those, there were two platforms that really caught my eye, and I thought this was so cool that she's been working on recently. So this thing rapidly maps, navigates, and searches complex underground environments, such as human-made tunnel systems, urban undergrounds, and natural cave networks. Where this is coming from, in part, is augmented reality.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the companies that I used to work for was working on what are called building information management. And so you take those architecture drawings, the CAD CAM drawings, and you've got pipes and ducting and inside the building. And so you create this digital model of that, and you can stand in the physical environment once the building is built, put on these augmented reality goggles, and you will see, like X-ray vision, where everything is supposed to be. What's behind the walls? What kind of conduits are behind the walls?
There's a lot of ways that could be very helpful and used.
Yeah. So this team is trying to rapidly assemble that information, allow people to navigate it, and then create search capabilities inside it. So we send a device in, map it autonomously and rapidly, allow people to analyze it quickly, and then decide where to send some other vehicle that's going to roam through it and search for what we need.
Wow.
Pretty intense stuff. And that's in human-made tunnel systems, urban undergrounds, and natural cave networks. Then another one that she has it's called NOMARS, which is they're exploring unmanned surface vessels. Okay, so basically boats. But the big thing is that they're doing this with human constraints removed. How do you design a boat when there's no people on? Like, what's made possible in a boat?
If you don't have to worry about the humans.
Yep.
Shape is going to change.
Yep.
I mean, maybe not the whole, because if that's designed for cutting through water and whatnot, but the top of the boat and the inside of the boat, those designs are going to change if they're not made for, if humans aren't going to be inhabiting them.
All
kinds of things
it.
are going to change.
I don't have an image to show you, but you basically described what they're showing. The top of the boat changes dramatically. The shape of the it's still a relatively triangular piece, but the curves that they're able to execute just looks like it really moves through the water. And these are for long endurance operations with no human crew on board. So we're talking about the same way that we put drones in the air and have them just scan an area with their cameras. They want to develop, it's harder to do that in water. It just takes more energy to move through water. So they're trying to figure out, how can we make a drone that's water-based?
Ooh.
And there's a quote from Pamela Melroy that I really liked and I thought I'd share. Believe you are far bigger than anything that can happen to you. In life's journey, there will be excitement and fulfillment, boredom and routine. But when you have picked a dream that is bigger than you, then you will always have another reason to carry on.
That is very nice. I like that. Way to go, Pamela.
Yeah, go Pamela. Penny, I want to tell you a little bit more about how we got to where we are. What are the historical events that feed into where we are in cloud computing, how things are moving.
Oh, that's so cool.
Where we're headed today.
I'm excited to hear about this, Jay.
One of our namesakes behind Order of the Cipher is Murray Boyd. That's actually the company behind it. And that's from Grace Murray Hopper and Evelyn Boyd Granville.
I've read about them. They are amazing women.
So Grace Murray Hopper was an educator. She was in the Navy and trained many, many, many people in the use of computers and the design of computers and the design of software. She really was a significant contributor.
Well, wasn't she a woman that created one of the first computer languages that was like you could use normal language instead of coding languages?
It was
There we go.
Yeah, it was a human readable, understandable language.
There we
go. It was called COBOL, which stood for Common Business Oriented Language. And she wrote she was part of the group that actually defined the language back in 1959. And so before that, the languages were basically different representations of how the computer worked at a low level. So they would try to make the computer's workings a little more understandable, but you still had to specify things the way the computer saw the world. And this was the first attempt to create a general purpose language that reflected how humans would interact with the world. And they chose, reasonably regularized human processes in business.
For example, you could type in print, maybe, and a document would pop out on the printer. Well, I don't know the particulars, but I know that the computer doesn't read those letters, print, and just know what to do. That gets translated into...
That gets compiled into computer understandable code. So COBOL would allow you to say what an invoice is. Well, an invoice has the name of a customer, and it's got there's a list of items that need to be on an invoice. And so COBOL was a way that humans could start to describe their processes that would repeat, very appropriate for a computer, but they could still go back in and read the language and debug that way. And so you could have a non-technical person involved in crafting the program.
Right.
She contributed to creating the compiler for that. In computing, you can really see how the design of the language defines what you're able to express in it. That's true in human languages, and it's true in computer languages. If a language has no what's that language that has no verbs or something? I mean, there's some very bizarre languages that exist around the world, and people manage to communicate in them. They have this language, it belongs to their people, and out of respect, they don't go and change it, and yet they have to try to express what's going on in their world, and they rub up against these limitations of the language. And the same thing happens in computer languages. So we don't see COBOL used as much today because it's very wordy. It takes a lot of typing to express something, and we got a little tired of having to express the same thing over and over again. But it was intended for non-technical people to be able to participate in crafting a computer program, and the expectation was that those people wouldn't start thinking in terms of shortcuts and cramming things into less space and having single characters represent entire things. I mean, there's a bunch of silliness that people do that are professionals today, but.
Right. Additionally, though, it was, if not the beginning, then it was close to the beginning of creating a language that people who are not coders can use to get computers to respond.
Yep.
So, of course, there's going to be advancements and changes and finessing that make different languages, and it served its purpose.
Yes. A beloved little piece of history there. COBOL.
Right. And Grace Murray.
And Grace Murray Hopper. A little personal story that we may or may not add into this is that I actually got a chance to migrate a COBOL application that ran a business, and we moved it off of a Hewlett-Packard mini mainframe system down in the basement and moved it onto some Windows machines. And I actually got to work with one of the members of the COBOL Standards Committee that still exists today and still moves the language forward. Yeah, it's now object-oriented. Object-oriented became popular with C++, and they extended it to COBOL, and he was one of the people that participated in doing that. So still alive and a true graybeard. Bob Garland, I owe you a debt. So there we go.
That's super cool.
Twitter Talk.
So today, Jay, for our Twitter topic, I want to discuss a thread from Rachel Toback. She's the CEO of Social Proof Security.
Great.
So she was discussing the recent Facebook breach.
Yes, the big one.
Yeah, that published a bunch of personal information online for millions of Facebook users. This includes name, location, email address, birthday, phone number, relationship status, all kinds of information. Now, we've all been part of various different breaches before. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's been published online. However, apparently the danger of having all of this information published together is twofold. So hackers look for this OSINT information, open source intelligence.
Okay.
And if they can find it all in one place, that makes it so much easier for them to do their job. They can either contact us directly because they have personal information and try to scam us directly.
Yep.
Or they can work to scam our service providers with, our birthday, our phone number, those kinds of things, and do account takeover. And their job has been made so much more easier now that all of that information is published.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And all together.
Yeah. Yeah. There's breaches like this all the time. This was basically scraping information off of Facebook, information that Facebook tries to keep secret or prevents it from being readily revealed. Okay. I mean, they don't try to keep it secret, but they don't want it to be revealed. It's a touchy kind of thing.
Right.
But this came up, I remember back in the Cambridge Analytica days and the election and stuff. There were researchers that had access to information that was not like secret and private, but also not public. It's in this gray area.
Right.
Yeah. And so, all these people's information from Facebook recently gets taken away. It is a little tough to put your finger on what the damage is that's done here, but it's hard for people to appreciate that refreshing this information is valuable too. So, one of the things that I get prompted with here and there is information from my credit report to verify that I am who I say I am, and they'll present some information to me that's that's a little bit privileged, but mostly because it's aged out. That's the thing. It's historical information, and they'll ask, what area code did you once have a connection to? What street did you once have a connection to? Information that isn't in my present life, but it is in my past life. And so there actually is value in connecting the past and the present, and having the current phone number and the past phone number and the name that I go by now and a name that I might have gone by before, maybe a married name. So, these are breadcrumbs. You put enough of them together and you start to develop a real picture of a person.
An algorithm of people's lives.
Over time.
Right? So one of the dangers that was pointed out in this thread is that businesses are still using bio information. So somebody's phone number or their birthday or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And now this is published online. So what's to stop somebody from calling my bank?
Oh, yeah.
And saying they're me, and now they have, my name, my birthday, my phone number.
Yeah.
They have all of that information.
One of the banks that I worked with at one point thought it was just more secure to just ask a bunch of those. What's your birthday and your phone number and your address and your email address? They would just kind of ask all of them.
Right.
But none of them were private.
Right. Additionally, all of those can be found online. So when I'm picking my own security questions, I look for things that you can't Google. My mother's maiden name, you can find that online.
Right.
Right?
I don't use my actual mother's maiden name either. No way.
Well, I have to be able to remember the answers to my questions. So what street did I live on when I was 12? It's a lot harder for somebody to have breached my information and have that. And I happen to remember that street. I'm not going to say it now.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't do that.
No.
Don't do that. Well, compelling stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
The dark side.
Penny, have you been owned?
Of course, Jay. Everyone has.
Yeah, probably. I got owned.
I mean, really, who hasn't received an email from some business that says, we'll provide you 1 year of...
Yeah. Credit monitoring services.
Yeah, everyone
keep on top
has.
of everything.
Plus, according to the phone calls I keep getting, my social security number has been used in different states for nefarious acts if I need to call their security person. I haven't done it yet.
You haven't done it yet?
I haven't done it yet.
Okay, some serious things are going to happen because of that. So I got owned, and I couldn't believe how many different times my information has been released. I'm actually going to pass these pages over to you because I want you to see some of this. This is just crazy here. We've got somewhere among 2,844 separate data breaches. My information just got included. Not 200,480 blah, 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 blah times, but there just were so many at once that they lumped them together. And then there's Animoto, this thing called Apollo. What's crazy is I don't remember these. I know Animoto was like an animation thing. I have no idea what Apollo is.
And your information is included in there in some way.
Yeah, and my information's there. Cafe Press, custom merchandise retailer. City. CIT 0 Day. I mean, who knows what that is?
Citibank, maybe? I mean.
Yeah. Evite, Kickstarter, LinkedIn.
Oh, LinkedIn, yeah.
Lord of the Rings Online. I signed up for like a day to see what that was about. Glad I did that. My Fitness Pal.
Oh.
Well, I don't even know what this next one is. Ticketfly.
Oh, my goodness.
Tumblr. I mean, Tumblr is... once upon a time, Tumblr was super popular. And
Evite.
Zynga, the game.
Oh, right.
Words with Friends.
To ages ago, I used to play.
I did Words with Friends, yeah.
I did a different one, but Zynga, yeah.
So over and over and over again. So
how did you find this information? Because I think I better look me up.
Yeah, that's this website, haveibeenowned.com or have I been pwned, PWNED. Have I been pwned, PWNED.com. And you plug in your email address. I only did one of my email addresses. I mean, there's a bunch for me out there, and who knows, I'll have to go check all the others, but pretty shocking how many are out there. So a long time ago, I decided that I would not ever use the same password in the same place again.
It's a good plan. Difficult to implement, but that's a good plan.
Well, it took a long time. I've really had to keep after it. And when I come across a place that does use one of my old, password, and there are none to my knowledge left. I've gotten all of them. It took me years, but
good job.
I eventually got through all of them, and everybody uses, big, long, random string of passwords. So that's the only thing that can really save you from these,
right? Because looking at that, you have a fair amount of accounts that have been compromised.
Yep, quite a few.
Let's just say
you didn't just want to dominate your opponent. You wanted to humiliate them, crush them in cyber war.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Stuxnet, you remember Stuxnet? So Stuxnet was probably the first real act of cyber war. This was mounted by Israel and the US against Iran, and it targeted a uranium enrichment facility called Natanz. What Stuxnet did was to report, it caused their centrifuges to report back that everything was fine while they were actually going into this critical overdrive. Yes, they were going into Stuxnet sent the centrifuges into overdrive while telling the monitoring scientists that everything was fine.
Fine.
It was described as a slow motion explosion, as a whole series of centrifuges just tore themselves apart. Because what these centrifuges do, to take a little detour, is you're separating, I'm going to get these isotopes wrong, but you're separating uranium-235 and 238. And there's one's just ever so slightly lighter than the other one, because it's got, neutrons. You're going to have, 3 more neutrons. So these centrifuges have to run at outrageous speeds for there to be enough of a difference between 235 neutrons and 238 neutrons. To spin that fast, you have to have these crazy advanced materials that can withstand it. So these things are and they're tall, and they're tall columns. This is when you see a centrifuge for blood, it's like this short, squat thing, and you put some vials of blood. And
right. I've been on something very similar for people. It was at a fair, and everybody got in, and then it circled around, and
all your thicker blood got pushed out, and all your thinner blood was left up at the front.
Yeah. For people, I'm sure that it doesn't go quite as fast as it does for uranium.
Yeah, I would not want my isotopes separated. No. I will keep them where they are. Thank you.
That's right.
So these tall, spindly columns that they're spinning at these crazy speeds. I mean, the thing is, in fact, this centrifuge program, when we talk, back in the day, we didn't want these people to get the bomb, and we didn't want these other people to get the bomb. This is like the hardest step in the entire thing. And as long as we could stop people from getting access to the materials or
the method of separation.
The method, yep. This was the linchpin, okay?
Right.
So it was a big deal that the Natanz facility was ever up and running. It was a huge deal that Stuxnet, it took them years. Israel and the US took years to plan this, case the joint. I'm going off memory here, so I might be wrong, but I believe that this moved around through USB drives at the time, so that these weren't even network connected systems. And so Stuxnet really had to make its way through the system. So they didn't have command and control over Stuxnet. Okay, they really did have to. They had sort of one shot at this. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
And I might be blending this with another attack, but I think that was Stuxnet. So anyway, that was like 10 years ago. And 10 years later, the Iranians, they've moved on from that. They repaired all that damage. Okay. So, they want to have this proud military moment as a nation 10 years later and say, we've got new capability, and look at the might of our country and what we're able to accomplish in this Natanz facility.
We're number one.
We're not, yeah.
Yeah.
The day after they make the announcement, there is an explosion in their power generators, a transformer units, and these generator units, so that the freaking centrifuges get destroyed again. 10 years later. And the Iranians are saying that these are infiltrators. They're saying that it was a physical attack done by the Israelis to, of course, I mean, the day after.
Right. They're not going to say that, we didn't secure our stuff well enough, and so somebody penetrated. No, they're gonna blame a physical attack. So what was it?
Well, we don't know. That's just
don't know.
The truth may come out. But the coincidence just was too much to pass up.
That is very suspicious.
And the power has to be, it's like perfectly balanced power, very conditioned, clean power, and because it's driving those motors.
Right.
And if you have anything that's off, then there's a little vibration, and suddenly, you've got the slow motion explosion again. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Seems so easy to introduce like one little bitty code.
Yep. I would not be surprised at all to find out that still that facility is not internet connected. I don't know why they would casually ever connect it.
Right.
It wasn't 10 years ago. The internet was around 10 years ago, and they didn't have it connected back then. I don't know why it would be connected now. So I guess it does kind of lean toward it being physical, but I don't know,
Sneakernet 10 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, let's just say you wanted to do it again.
Let's just say.
AWS released a new feature for IAM that I think you are going to love.
Really?
Yes.
Let's hear it.
It analyzes recent activity and it generates a policy that you can use in AWS that only has that activity.
Oh my goodness. I love this already. Tell me more.
Well, what you do is just create a new role or a new user and give them all the permission that they could possibly want.
Admin. So I give them admin.
Give them admin. That's acceptable. Let them do their job. So if the role is being applied to a Lambda function, then throw all the tests that you want to do with the Lambda function so that you can see every service that the Lambda function could possibly need to access. Or if it's a role applied to an EC2 instance, you could, again, run the code, run your tests, let the EC2 instance access everything in AWS that it needs to. Then you go back into IAM and you tell it to look at just that role's activity or just that user's activity over the relevant time period.
And then it tells you what they need.
And then it spits out a policy. It's just that simple.
That is so much better than what I've been trying to do.
Yeah. Just have someone go do their job for a while, or have the code execute for a while, look at what it used and say, yeah, good enough. I mean, it's 80-20. It could be 100% of what they need. Okay. And it's more than likely going to be 80% of the work in 20% of the time. It also puts in these little placeholders so that you can do resource level permission. So just trying to make it easier for people to specify just the S3 bucket that it needs, or.
Oh, that's fair. So not only does it write the policy for it needs these permissions to S3.
Yes.
But then it gives you a placeholder. So I can in turn say, you only get this bucket or that bucket or that bucket.
Exactly.
Not all the buckets.
Yep. There were some comments though about, there are a few API calls that don't get recorded in CloudTrail. This whole thing is driven by CloudTrail, where we see the history of API activity on the account. Fair point. There are a few, but again, it's 80,
still a
20.
It's a better starting point. So the way that I would start before is the managed policies offered by AWS. I would look at, we have a developer coming on. So what's he going to need to do, or she? What are they going to need to do? And then try to closely mirror using the managed policy first, because to be honest, there are thousands of things that you can craft
Possibly
your
need.
own policy for.
Yeah.
And I don't know what those words all mean. They're English, but I don't know what they all mean. So how do I, in the quickest manner possible, give somebody what they need? But we all know that least privilege is the best way to go. But how do I enforce that when I don't know individually what to do? So this is a much better starting point than using the AWS managed policies.
Well, I'm really glad that I could tell you about it, and hopefully we get to use it soon.
Yeah, I'm excited. So in order to answer this listener question, we have to give some background information.
Okay.
Earlier this year, in January 2021, it was announced that there was a breach at Ubiquiti. This was a massive breach. They obtained root access to all of the AWS accounts.
That's not good. At Ubiquiti.
At Ubiquiti.
Now, this is the company that makes networking gear. Like they make a lot of outdoor networking gear. That's what I know them for.
Not just outdoor networking gear, but the routers, things that run your network.
Yes.
All of that. We have some Ubiquiti routers.
We do.
We do.
Okay.
So, and they make 85 million devices worldwide. More than 85 million devices worldwide were impacted by this breach because root access to the AWS account gave them access to all of the S3 buckets, databases, all of the resources in Amazon Web Services. According to an unnamed source, the breach was massive. Customer data was at risk. Access to customers' devices deployed in corporations and homes around the world was at risk. So, all Ubiquiti AWS accounts were compromised. All the resources within them, including database, S3, all of that.
Complete total access.
Complete total access.
Jeez. And we know this because of the unnamed source, not...
Yes.
Okay.
So the question becomes, our listener question is... No. You have to back up. None of this is the fault of AWS. This is 100% the responsibility of Ubiquiti.
Okay.
Our listener question is, at what point does AWS become more proactive and start enforcing more security by default?
Ooh, good question, because AWS has been changing policies around open S3 buckets. Like they'll step into a customer's account and change a policy. See, there's a lot that we don't know here.
Fair.
How did they get that root access?
The password was in a LastPass account of one of the employees at Ubiquiti. AWS doesn't have responsibility for this breach, and I wanted to make that clear. But the question ends up being, when does AWS start applying more security by default? Access to root account does not require two-factor authentication. Why not? I mean, access to root gives you everything.
Yeah. And there's lots of companies that require two-factor authentication. I can't create an account without it. How on earth?
And there are some things, and you know better than me, but there are some things that can only be done in root. And they're important master things.
Yeah.
Management things now. But
yeah.
they are critical, they are uber user, and they have to be done in root. Why would root not have, at a minimum,
more security,
two-factor authentication?
Okay. So when you say that they got root access, you're talking about the root of the root user of the account.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah. Additionally, it hasn't been made clear from what I read However, it seems like it would be root access to the organization account. So the master account or the management account, because all accounts were compromised.
Yeah.
Which means if they have multi-account structure, then there's a management or an organization account and then sub-accounts underneath them. And all the accounts were compromised.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. Trying to get access to an organization account, a sub account, there's some emails involved, things that could be triggered. However, if they just compromised an administrator, the LastPass had the usernames and passwords to all of the AWS accounts in the organization, then yeah, they could just waltz right into any one of them. So I know a few things about this breach, and the thing that really stood out to me is the press release. So the press release was saying,
it's not that bad.
It was saying it's not that bad. The press release was saying, we are not aware of any attempt to access customer information or any targeted customer. But word is, the reason they're not aware is they had no logging. They have no idea who accessed anything.
So they can say we're unaware because there is no way for them to know.
Yes. And their initial release on this was Ubiquity. I'm not going to get this quite right, but Ubiquity had a third-party database accessed. And I can't remember if I don't think they called out who the third party was, but they're saying AWS. But obviously in that statement, they're relying on our interpretation to assume, oh, those third parties.
Right.
Can't trust them.
Shifting the blame.
Shifting some blame there. Yeah, those third parties.
By being obscure.
But what they really mean
deflecting.
is we created an AWS resource. We were negligent in securing it. No logging, poor password controls, and everything to do with our customers' devices was potentially scraped,
right,
exited.
Right. We don't know because they didn't have the logging, but how does this impact the world in general? The 85 million devices that are out in the world that might have been compromised.
Yeah.
These are enterprise level routers and network devices.
I have a catalog of everything you use.
Yeah. These are, startup routers like we have. The passwords. So you get the password into the router or the network devices, and where can you go from there?
Yeah. Yeah.
They make home cameras and stuff like that. So you get the password into the router. Can you see what's on the home cameras?
Yeah.
Maybe. Maybe not. We don't know.
So Penny, what did the listener ask us?
The listener question comes down to, it's really a gray area. It's where does AWS become more proactive about enforcing additional security on these high-level accounts? Is it their responsibility? Well, no, technically it's Ubiquity's responsibility. However, these are high-level, very powerful accounts that can do lots of things, and it's such a small thing to require two-factor authentication or to say this is from a different IP address. Maybe I send an email to the email address on file to confirm that this should be happening.
So I think for AWS has the ability to encourage and educate and set sane defaults. And they really could offer a service that, meaning not a AWS service, but Amazon could offer an option to customers that says, don't let me do things that are too stupid. And if you enroll in that program, then a whole set of SCPs is put in place. So it's like, so they could use the control tower and organizations tools that exist today, and they could add new policy options and set strong defaults so that the enterprise has confidence that no part of their organization can step outside the guardrails and do something just completely boneheaded. They must be moving in that direction. I certainly hope they're moving in that direction.
One would hope. Is there a reason that you're aware of why you would not want two-factor authentication on the root account or the root access to an account?
I think the short answer is no. There's no technical reason. I think if they were doing it today, they would probably avoid even having a root of the account. It is a baked in concept that comes from the early days when literally you used your Amazon shopping logon to get into your account.
Which is
at the
fair.
time,
I
IAM didn't always exist. Like
right.
IAM itself is a service that didn't always exist. So you were entering S3 and EC2 with just a root account, just the one that you were going and buying, kitty litter and paper towels with.
Right. This is fair. And I understand like infrastructure that is so built in that that's not something that you can change. However, having a root account and realizing how powerful that is, and knowing that there is no real reason why not to have, at a minimum, two-factor authentication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If they can't get away from root or get rid of root altogether, then at what point would it be in their domain to require two-factor authentication for root?
I don't know what's stopping them. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Okay.